Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and if you find our video great, give us a subscribe for more awesome content. A child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. What is an example of this that you've seen or experienced firsthand? Does anyone know the actual story of King Shaka Zulu? He was literally that guy. Shaka was born as an illegitimate son of a Zulu, and was thus rejected by the Zulu settlements. He spent his childhood growing up in his mother's settlements and was then lent an army, which he used to take over the Zulu tribe. One of the greatest, but most intense, African warriors and monarchs of all time. I went to school with a kid who seemed a little disturbed. Maybe it's just my bias, but he definitely seemed like the school shooter type. Well, no one liked this kid and constantly picked on him. Once in some random class in 7th grade, I asked him if he wanted to be my partner for some dumb little assignment. We chatted in class for the rest of the year. Toward the end of high school, he told me I kept him from some bad shit by being his best friend. I literally only talked to him in class for a few months, and by that point hadn't talked to him in years. Embrace everyone, folks. You never know whether it might change someone's life. Kid went to school. He was in special behavioral classes, and then was put into our class in 4th grade. My teacher was hard on him. One day, the kid had a tantrum and threw a chair. He was sent back to the special classes, which probably destroyed him. He continued on and in high school, was one of the freaks. Always wore a trench coat, in Texas, mind you, was into nerdy things. I talked to him sometimes, but wouldn't really call him a friend, more just nice to him. He would be reading a AD&D book and we'd chat about that, being my uncle got me into RPGs. In 11th grade, school went into lockdown for some unknown reason. Found out he committed suicide in one of the school bathrooms. Heard he wrote letters to faculty and friends prior to doing it. I work with kids who have mental health issues. Many of them have attempted suicide, ran away, self-harm, or have an addiction of some kind by their mid-teens. They always have some kind of traumatic family life that's pushed them to that problem. One thing we see again and again is the poor kid who comes in after the parent, guardian has belittled them and told them what a piece of garbage they are for years. Eventually the kid starts acting out, which the adult uses as proof that he or she was right all along about the kid being an awful piece of shit. One kid I worked with was in and out of treatment programs for a couple of years and had exactly this kind of parents. Father was always on the road driving a truck and checked out when he was at home. Mom was personality disordered and extremely emotionally and verbally abusive. One day, while his father was on the road, this boy murdered his mother by bludgeoning her to death with a hammer while she slept in. Then he kept her body in the house for a few days, abusing the corpse before stuffing her remains into the trash can and leaving them on the curbside for pickup. I knew a girl a few years back who I think is a decent example of this. She was diagnosed with AD back in primary school and was shunned by her whole family because of it. As a result, she had low self-esteem and slowly grew a profound hatred for people, which resulted in everyone at school hating her, and as a result her hatred grew more. After her 17th birthday she ran away, but before she did she had spent about 5 years gathering dirt on everyone who wronged her. She released it all, which resulted in her parents splitting and a bunch of other kids being expelled or getting into shit with their parents, and if memory serves me correctly, one kid even got disowned because of what everyone found out about him. She ended up running up to a family friend of mine and is still working on rebuilding her life. It's a shame because she is one of the nicest people I know and is a very honest person. Everyone just treated her like crap, so she burned it all. I once attended a birthday party with a bouncy castle. The birthday kid and their friends kicked the younger sibling and his friend out, so they unplugged it and watched everyone's dismay as it deflated. Way to go, Mason. Badass moves for a 12-year-old. I used to be into amateur radio after a short stint in the Army Cadets. There was one guy, in the East Midlands, UK, who was one of the adult instructors. He was always telling us about amateur radio, and would hand out old, cheaper pieces of tech he tried out and wasn't keeping. Anyway, he was a little weird, overly friendly, with adults, never had any bad vibes around the kids, and obviously had some social anxiety which he was compensating for. Personally, I suspect he was on the autistic spectrum, but who knows. After I left the cadets and went to UNI, I stayed in touch on Facebook. We were in the same Facebook group for amateur radio hobbyists. He always liked to do things by the book, and instilled in us the importance of being responsible and socially conscious with our radio use. He was the same on Facebook, reminding people that Mrs. Miggins on her 10-pound handset wouldn't know about transmission power, and squelch, etc. He mentioned in passing to a new member the importance of only using the public unlicensed channels, kind of like CB radio in the US, on the correct, very low, power setting of half a watt. He mentioned it was because Mrs. Miggins trying to reach her kid in the next street wouldn't understand the idea that she could hear you but couldn't reach you to ask you to be quiet a minute. He was correct here, and it's also a criminal offense to transmit at higher power on these frequencies, even though it's not enforced. Anyway, this got someone's back up, and he was kicked from the group for preaching. After unsuccessfully asking to be let back in, he set up a larger antenna in his back garden, set up a super fancy aerial atop it, with a 30-watt transmission system. This is really quite powerful. He now turns this on for several hours a day on whatever channels the radio club group are using to teach them the importance of good etiquette. This means that nobody can use certain frequencies for hours at a time, as it just sounds like someone is having a one-way conversation on air. He could probably get arrested, but that doesn't seem to bother him at all. I'm a behavioral interventionist at a middle school. My job is technically to pull disruptive students out of class, get them redirected, then back into their classroom. Most of my job is actually a sounding board and an understanding ear to kids who struggle. My entire job is an example of that quote. The neglect and abuse of some of those kids will break your heart. Throw away because F these guys. I worked at a very famous family-oriented company for almost 15 years. I was damn good at my job, but refused to brown nose or play dirty office politics, so I stayed pretty much in my original spot for a long time. Because of this, I became a pretty regularly used advice platform for other employees on how to handle workplace issues, and because I valued my integrity, I never reported red flags to management, but always encouraged the person to do so on their own behalf. Eventually a few key people remembered how I helped them, and circumvented the usual cronyism to bring me into their teams for big-name projects. It was a nice change and I appreciated the chance to stretch. Then, I started getting systematically bullied and harassed by the in-crowd who had decided I was unworthy of being in their presence. I ended up going to therapy about it to help develop tools to deflect while desperately looking for a way out. Eventually, I got another job and handed a sort of manifesto to HR when I turned in my 30 days notice. Racism, sexual harassment, assault, blatant favoritism, theft. All with dates, names, and supporting evidence. Basically an HR nightmare because they couldn't control what I did when I left, including going to the press. My departure gave them 30 days to ask me questions, interview me, whatever. But it never came. Thing is, I also sent that novel off to the EOC. They opened an investigation with the company, and the moment they did, all hell broke loose. See, the people who were too afraid to come forward before now had an out. They weren't snitching, they were complying with an investigation per company policy. So suddenly, scores of people were testifying to HR about the horrific things they had been subject to. Some people were fired. Others demoted. A few got off scot-free. But I sleep like a baby now. I worked in an office for a Fortune 500. One of our longtime team members, G, worked as a level 2 employee for quite a while. She was good enough to be a level 3 or level 4 employee but never took the offer because she was a single mom, relied on public transportation, etc. Her friend, P, started at the same time she did and was a level 3, working up to a level 4. P and G were all good, until P discovered that G made more than P because she was constantly getting merit raises and performance bonuses. One day, G made an honest mistake. Our client just switched to a different protocol for billing and she accidentally did it the old way. It was a no harm, no foul situation, but P went to the level 4 employees and senior management and suggested that G be fired. They all went to HR, who said that while there was no valid reason to fire her, they could move her to a shittier team that would basically guarantee her failure. G realized what was happening and secured another job. We were going to be off for 4 days for Christmas, and G quit Thursday by leaving an after-hours voicemail. G knew that the message wouldn't be received until Monday morning, so she sent out an email to the entire building, timed to be sent at 11:59 Christmas Eve. The email detailed how P was having an affair with her Bill while her husband was deployed, how one senior manager took this job because he was fired for embezzlement and lost his CPA license, and how one of our male level 3 employees requested a transfer because our married department manager was sexually harassing him. We got in at 8, HR and IT got in at 9. It was a shit show Monday morning. Quite a few people quit that day. And to think, it all could have been avoided. Edit 1, thanks for the award. Edit 2, I've run into G and P since then. G is thriving. She got a stern phone call from the company and they tried to withhold her last paycheck, but that was it. P is, well, a little more humble now. She was going through some serious shit at the time, and while that doesn't excuse any of the shit that she did, I think the letter was a wake-up call that she needed to fix her life. Edit 3, level 3 employee is doing well. He quit a year after for a better opportunity. Edit 4, I'm not going to say who it is, but it is not Procter & Gamble. I worked at an ice cream shop. I won't name which one, but all I'll say is they may have slightly more than 30 flavors. Anyway, my boss was a conservative Mormon who lashed out at me anytime a piercing or tattoo was showing. The manager and boss would sit in the back and make lists of physically exerting tasks for me to do, while maybe one of them spent an hour frosting a single cake. Legally, if you work 6 hours you get a lunch break, but my boss would routinely make me work on lunches. At the time there were maybe 5 employees and we were all overworked and begging our boss to hire new people. I am a generally easygoing person. I'm usually chipper, hyper and super happy, especially towards customers. It's just my personality that I want to help people and make them smile. I really got along with my coworkers. Constantly cracking jokes with them and dancing. Always got closing duties done early and always made sure every task was crossed off. Over time I noticed my paychecks weren't what they were supposed to be. By almost $2 an hour. Minimum wage had gone up, and I was a shift lead, so I got a $1 bonus, but I went through my checks and realized the math didn't add up and I had been cheated out of almost $3,000 from the time I started working until it was brought to my attention. I asked my boss about it and she said because I didn't have the $1 bonus handwritten from her it didn't exist, and she asked me to apologize to her for accusing her of cheating me out of money. 2 weeks later, I came into work and she handed me my last paycheck and wouldn't say why I was being let go. When the other workers found out I had been fired, 3 of the 4 employees quit that day, 4th being the manager that constantly harassed me and the younger girls. The others had been there less than 4 months and weren't very experienced. They were already overworked and stressed. I felt like I brought a certain kind of calmness to the chaos when it got busy. And I think I made working fun for myself and my coworkers because I knew how much it sucked being there and I wanted to make the most of it with them. When they left, they said my boss cried. Immediately after California was put on lockdown and she wasn't able to hire new people because no one was applying. Long story short, she had to close and has been closed since March 26. I was let go March 24. I drive past every day on my way home, and they still aren't open. It's unfortunate but I don't feel bad. Edit sorry for a long speech. My brother. My family wasn't loving. I coped it with my venturing out and exploring on my own. I would leaving early each day and explore nature, only coming home for food. My brother coped with the lack of love with sex, drugs, fighting, parties, and theft. He had a super distorted view of needing love and he really acted like if he wasn't getting love, Then the world deserved to burn. He went into prison in his teens. He got out in his 20s, tried to be good for a year, but couldn't find his concept of love, so he started burning the village again, went back in. Got out years later, tried to go clean, and this time found love. But he pushed himself too hard to be lovable. He developed a super personality built on meth. He did drugs to keep up, lost his love, and started to burn the village down again. The last time, the local sheriff ended the cycle. He wasn't going back in. During the road chase, they filled his windshield with bullets and he veered off a cliff and died in the dirt. It was the headline of the local news. I think I may forever compare my life to my brother's. How could we be so different? We had the same parents and endured very similar pains. But I didn't choose to burn down the village. I chose to distance myself and survive. He went nuclear. The village didn't have a chance. I go a police call to go by a school. I arrived and I see a teacher holding a small kid back and the other kid who looked like he just got hit by a bus. His arm looked backwards, his face was bloodied, he had hair ripped out, was on the floor as paramedics took him to the ambulance. I arrested the kid while I had to question him. He said, and I quote, "I want to be noticed." It haunted me as I sent out a report to do a background check on the parents. Turns out the kid was being neglected, and as school teachers reported that others would push past him and shove him and not even notice him. He was smiling as he then said, "People finally looked at me. It's been so long since that I felt horrible," as I passed the case to a different person as I couldn't handle it. I'm not sure it applies here, but that's the first thing that came to mind when I saw this.